Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Steph and I talk about books, reading and writing them. And in this video, I am going to be sharing my thoughts about the, I think 10 books that I read in October. I can't believe it's October, oh my God. Plus 2 very short story, audible, original type of things. Let's just start and get straight into it because that means I get to talk about my favorite book of all time. This was a reread. This is Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. I yapped about this pretty recently in my Gothic book recommendations video, and talking about it made me want to reread it. Rebecca is following an unnamed character in, I want to say, the 1930s, who is a lady's companion in Monaco? Monte Cristo. And while she's there, she meets this much older man, Mr. De Winter, marries him, and they have like this little whirlwind romance at the very beginning of the book. And then it turns into a romantic suspense. I would say heavy on the suspense, less on the romance and focus between the characters. Because the girl that we're following is really fixated and kind of obsessed and a little jealous and feels very inferior for many like age and class reasons, because Mr. De Winter is recently widowed, and when she returns to his old family home, Manderley, there are like echoes and sort of ghosts, figurative ghosts of his wife everywhere. And the way that this is written is so beautiful. Like, her command of words is stunning. I read it almost every year. I love this book so much. It was a great reread, of course. This is a Folio Society edition, which I also really love. It's illustrated. That's them when they're first meeting. Yeah, this is just such a great book. I don't really know what else to say about it. 10 out of 10, as usual. I will link my Gothic recommendation video down below where I talk about it a little bit more. The next book that I read was called Fruit of the Dead. This is a real strange one. I was really taken in by all of the different covers that I had seen of it. I just thought that the design was so stunning. I could not stop thinking about it. This is a really interesting sort of literary, contemporary retelling of Persephone and Demeter, and it's a really great debut as well. So we're following a young woman, she's like 18 or 19, who is a camp counselor, and one of the parents at the end of the camp year gives her this offer to like come and be a nanny for his children, and to like pick up and like go immediately. And it's a great opportunity because it gives her a lot of freedom from her mother, and she kind of feels like a bit of a loser and a little bit lost in her life. So she agrees to go. And this guy is like the top 1%. He works for big pharma. He's taking her to this like private island. It's very strange, but he's also obviously like the kind of rich, creepy guy who wants to sleep with the nanny. Okay, I want to make that clear. This is not Hades as a dark prince of the underworld. This is like Epstein. This is not sexy. And then we're also following the perspective of her mother, who is working for like an agriculture NGO. And she's like in China when her daughter pretty much goes off the map and won't really say anything about where she's working. She becomes increasingly difficult to come to contact, and the mom like loses her mind and is like, I know that something is wrong. I need to go find her. So yeah, I don't know how much I should really say about it, because I think you should just go in with like that. That's a lot of information already to get started with, but it was very interesting. I definitely recommend it. I had a little bit of a hard time to take the Epstein Hades character seriously because his first name was Rollo. Where I am from, Canada, and I think anywhere in North America, there is a chocolate bar that I grew up really loving called Rollo's, and I couldn't I could not stop thinking about the chocolate bar every single time. There were definitely a few scenes that were hard to read. There is on-page assault, and I felt like this book was kind of trying to criticize big pharma and the 1%, but I don't know if it totally tied together as nicely as I wanted it to in the end. But I think that's kind of a minor criticism and it shouldn't hold you back. I feel like I just said a bunch of quite negative things about this book, but I did really enjoy it. But I also feel like I can't talk that much about what I really enjoyed without spoiling it for you, and you should just go in for the ride. So that is Fruit of the Dead. It's a very engrossing, strange little book. After that, I finally picked up a book called House of Salt and Sorrows. This was mentioned and I think recommended to me by Elizabeth at A Literary Princess a very long time ago. So it's a retelling of the 12 Dancing Princesses. She has a really great series where she does fairy tale retellings and like talks about the fairy tale itself and then about different retellings that kind of look at the fairy tale from different angles. It was really great. Enjoyed it, and I picked this up on her recommendation and I'm so glad that I did it. So for this setting, just imagine like gothic Driftmark from Game of Thrones. Okay, it's called, I think, The Salt, and all of the similes and the metaphors and stuff are all like watery and salty and like sea related. So it was just super immersive, and I felt like, yeah, the world building was so good. It just feels like you're in this salt-soaked forlorn castle full of ghosts, secret passages, and you don't know like what's real and what isn't. The vibes are immaculate is what I'm trying to get across. Anyway, so this is following the perspective of Anna Lee. She is one of, I think, 12 sisters who live in this castle, and everybody that's kind of in the village thinks that their family might be cursed because her sisters keep dying. And the story actually starts off at the funeral of one of the sisters. I don't know why I look so excited about this. But for this one last sister who passed away, it was kind of mysterious circumstances. Like Anna Lee starts having these suspicions that maybe it wasn't an accident and maybe somebody actually like killed her. This was just deliciously creepy as we follow her trying to unveil the secrets and the people who like live there and the magic, because there is like sort of this cosmology of gods and they have these sort of like magical elements to them, which I'm not sure if I completely caught all of the full cosmology. Like I did struggle with tracking that, but I wasn't tracking it super closely in the very beginning, and so I might have missed something. But that's like my only thing is like pay attention, because that does kind of become important. Yeah, if you like the feeling of questioning whether or not your narrator is reliable, this was such a good book. This was so good. It is technically YA, but it doesn't necessarily read as like young. Okay. Okay, so the next one that I have to talk about is an Audible original, and it is called Evil Eye. It really reminded me of radio dramas because the whole story is told between phone conversations between this mom who's moved back to India and her daughter who is in like Los Angeles or somewhere on that coast. And the mom was constantly trying to set her daughter up with guys to date, and the daughter is like, oh, I don't think that this really works. But the mom is like, no, I consulted like oh, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the name, but sort of like a fortune teller person to like look at, you know, your horoscopes and everything. And then the daughter actually ends up dating somebody, and the mom is hearing from India about like the relationship is so good, and the mom just gets like completely set off by something about this relationship, and she becomes convinced that her daughter might have like a curse. It's so good. It was really good. It was not what I was expecting at all. I just had so much fun listening to The Evil Eye. So if you have Audible, if you're looking for a really quick, easy listen that is spooky and really fast paced, I loved it. And the narration is great. And I just thought that it really, even from like a craft perspective, if you're interested in that kind of thing, this showed character through dialogue really well as well. So, The Evil Eye. After that, I read House of Shadows by Darcy Coates. This is my first Darcy Coates read. Again, this is kind of gothic leaning, so we are, I want to say like in the Victorian era, I'm pretty sure. And this girl's family has lost all of their money because of shipping accidents or things. Very conveniently, the guy she met the night before at the theater or the opera proposes and says, you can come and live with me. I will make sure that your brother is able to stay in school. I will make sure your family is all provided for. The only kind of downside is that you have to come and move into my very isolated manor house, very far away from everybody, and be my bride. And it was really good. It was really good. I wasn't so sure the first couple of chapters. Like, I was enjoying myself, but I wasn't hooked. But on like chapter 2 or 3, he has to abandon her on the road because of something extremely urgent, and like goes home ahead of her, and then she goes to the manor house all alone. And then the suspense and like secrets begin to build layer on layer on top of each other. I had kind of a sense that it leaned a bit more to contemporary horror in some of the spooky kind of tropes that were being drawn in. If you like a bleeding house, ghosts, a door you shouldn't go into, malevolent family members, it's all kind of in there. This is, I believe, a duology, but you can read it as a standalone. Just don't read the epilogue. I haven't decided yet if I'm going to continue on to the book 2. I think probably I will, because I really enjoyed this a lot. But I don't think that the series needed to continue either. You can totally read it as a standalone. I picked up a novella called The Grown Up. Actually, I think I listened to this on audio as well. It was about an hour or two long. I was going for a long walk. I needed something to listen to. I like Gillian Flynn, and I didn't like this very much. So the woman we follow is somebody who worked as a prostitute for a little while, and then she's kind of gone into conning people by pretending she is like a spooky fortune teller. I think like the character work and the way that that was written was really fun to read, but then the story itself, when one of the women comes in and like wants our main lady to come do like a cleansing of the house, like I listened to it, but it was fine. Everything comes together in the end. There is a nice little twist. There's a couple twists throughout it, and yeah, it was fine. The next book I have to talk about was a DNF. So I got this on KU. It's called Master of Salt and Bones, and I've heard that it was like a gothic romance, and everything about the cover and the title, everything in me was just like, yes, I love a gothic romance. I love anything really that is gothic by the sea, and realizing this is something I absolutely love. So Master of Salt and Bone, I got into chapter 6 or 7 out of probably like 40, so I really didn't get that far. Sometimes I don't even talk about books that I DNF very early on, but I feel like this was just such an experience to read. So as far as I remember and know, we are following what the fuck is her name again? I have no idea what the main character's name is. I'm looking at the reviews and I don't know what the characters' names are. So the premise of this is pretty much just girl goes to be a companion and carer for an old woman who is living with her son. She's hired by, the son has a really notorious kind of reputation. He's called like the devil of bone salt. And the woman, the old lady that she's taking care of, is supposed to be like a little bit loopy. And it's set in this vast, sprawling stone mammoth of like a, not like fully a castle, but like grand house on, I want to say, the east coast of the United States. I think the first thing that had me like, ooh, was that the main girl was super emo, like a history of self-harm and like tattoos and piano prodigy, even though she's had like no piano classes or anything like that, like long dark hair that's very straight and in her face. It was a very 2000s vibe. Like, it just reminded me of what I would have been obsessed with when I was a little bit younger growing up. But I wanted to give it a chance because it felt like it could have been House of Salt and Sorrows mixed with Jane Eyre, which could be a killer combination, and it wasn't. It wasn't. Okay, what made me actually put it down was that there is a difference for me between a gothic romance and a dark romance, and I just hit a point. I hit the first smut scene. I have a feeling this is going to be quite a smutty book. It just made me think this is going to be a dark romance. This is playing with tropes and like walking the edge of something that doesn't really work for me. I like romance and horror, but I don't want the fact that these two people are in love and connecting with one another to be the horror. Does that make sense? Like, I don't want to romanticize abuse. I don't know how I feel about it, but there was just something about it that had me going like, yeah, this isn't I'm not the audience for this one. Don't necessarily let that deter you if you are a dark romance reader, you like a gothic romance, and you have a, I guess, higher threshold for certain things than I do. There you go. I hit this point in the month where I was really wanting to read. I wanted something that was a bit of a palate cleanser, and all of the books that I had on hold at the library were not available yet. So I picked up something that was, and that was an Ember in the Ashes. This was a YA quartet that was very popular on BookTube a few years ago. And I thought, I'm going to talk about the first 2 books, spoiler free, obviously, but focusing on the very first. And I would be very interested to know if you have read this series. Leave me a comment how you feel about it. Did you love it? Is it worth continuing? Because I'm not completely sure. So, An Ember in the Ashes. I'm looking up the girl's name again. Laya. So we are following Laya. Her brother gets arrested in like chapter 1. She goes to the resistance against this empire, which is very like Roman influenced. This was an interesting book because it blended kind of Arab cultural influences with Roman Empire influences together. She becomes a spy to somebody important in exchange for assistance from the resistance to free her brother. I don't know if this makes sense, but like, she's a spy and she's working as a slave in a military school. And then we have a second POV, which is Elias. And he is one of the students at the military school. His mom is a big deal, has a lot of power, and is like the primary, not employer, if you're a slave, like owner of Laya. And he has this kind of ongoing internal dilemma about should he leave the empire because he can see the injustices that exist and like really struggles with some of that. And then there's like trials and stuff that's going on. The setting of the school and the trials and stuff that were going on kind of reminded me a little bit of The Will of the Many, and just the fact that you're in there spying, but it definitely is its own. I enjoyed it. Obviously, I read the second book, so I thought that Laya was pretty stupid, and I'm not sure if that's just because it was a YA book, but she seemed extremely naive given who she was and like the kind of experiences that she had. But I thought that this was done better than a lot of the YA fantasies that were coming out around the time, and I enjoyed it. It was like love triangles upon love triangles upon love triangles. Little content warning, there is a pervasive, constant threat of sexual violence against Laya particularly, and like all characters. It was throughout the book, but nothing was really shown on page. That's just something that you might want to be aware of. I was kind of surprised because I don't think that I have read a book where that is so pervasive for a really long time, and definitely not in YA. I didn't think that it was done badly. I thought it was done totally fine. Yeah, then I picked up Torch Against the Night. I kind of felt similar. Like, I enjoyed it quite a bit. I can tell that I'm not fully the audience for this anymore, which kind of is a bummer because I would have loved it if I had read it a few years ago. And Laya definitely improves throughout the series because I feel like she started off just not very smart in the first book, but I kind of suspect that she is that way because so that she can have a character arc of a lot of growth and in like cleverness and bravery and, you know, all of that stuff. But yeah, overall, A Torch Against the Night just kind of left me thinking like that was a fun, good time. There were a lot of conveniences, and it's not a high priority for me to finish, but I still might, I don't know. So if you think that the last 2 books are really worth it, I will read them. Just tell me. Okay, the next book that I read, I filmed a whole reading vlog about, so I will be brief and link the vlog below. That is The House on Watch Hill. So this is following a young woman. Her mother has recently died, and she inherits a grand house in Louisiana area and an enormous fortune from some relative she had no idea she even had. And as part of the condition of receiving her inheritance, she has to actually go and live in the house on Watch House. The house is situated in this town called Divinity, and pretty quickly we learned that this is not a town like other towns. It is a little bit of a witchy town, and our main girl may or may not be a little bit witchy herself. It is kind of like Discovery of Witches, but lightly gothic, and I feel like later on in the series it might be a little bit hornier. Definitely recommend. She cannot write the sequel fast enough. I think it's the beginning of a trilogy. After that, I read a very underrated dark academia. So this is called the Two Doctors Gorski, and it's set in a similar world to ours, but like with magic. So it's kind of normal to go to university and one of the subjects happens to be magic. And a lot of people who study magic at university are studying it for like biology reasons. They're making plants do cool stuff, but our girl is interested in psychiatric magic. She wants to better understand magic and how it intersects with consciousness, and hopefully be able to use it to help people who are struggling with mental health issues. But because of stuff that happened at her last institution with her last supervisor, she has to switch schools, and the only supervisor who will take her is Dr. Gorski, who is known for basically creating a duplicate of himself, and he's put part of himself into this other Dr. Gorski, and so she kind of works on her thesis with both of them. Yeah, I don't know how to totally explain it. It's almost a Jekyll and Hyde situation, and then there's also this kind of facet of she reads people's minds. It's an interesting book. It's really interesting, and I thought that it really handled a lot of questions that come up in academia very well. And I recommend that you read it for sure. And I recommend that you watch my vlog because I have a lot of thoughts about it that I will share with you, spoiler free. I read A Winter's Promise. This was a buddy read with Kat at Curious Cat, channel linked below. I really enjoyed this. I'm so glad that we did a buddy read because this is one of those books that has been on my TBR for absolutely ever. I see it come up and people talk about it and people say that it's like different and interesting and they loved it. But for some reason, I just feel like I didn't totally grasp what it was about enough to intrigue me and pull me in to actually pick it up. But Kat loves it. This was a reread for her. This is my first time reading it, as I said. She read it in the original French. I read it in English. That ended up being quite interesting for us. But in this, we are following Ophelia. She has a marriage of convenience to someone who is living on another arc. And I think I need to explain the world building a bit because that's not gonna make sense. So an arc is, I will put a picture of the cover. The cover is here. Okay, that is an arc, what you are currently seeing. They kind of remind me of little tops with floating societies that you use airships to travel between them. So Ophelia goes to one arc, and then her fiance arrives and picks her up and takes her away to his arc with his family. Then we are just following her as she is kind of discovering this larger world because he's kind of an important dude. He's got some money, he's got some responsibilities, he's got some enemies. And she is staying in his aunt's house while he is kind of off doing stuff, and she is figuring out how this world works, and she's not really prepared for it at all. And then there's this facet of where people have different kinds of magical abilities depending on what family that they're coming from. And so for Ophelia, she has a really great one, which she uses when we first meet her working in a museum, where if she touches an object, like a book, she gets insight or like blasted with the history of that book or the person who's attached to that book. So I might pick up this book and suddenly have like an image of my husband picking up the book and like whatever else might have happened when he was doing that, if that makes sense. So it's very helpful if you're working in a museum. It's very helpful for Ophelia as she's going around trying to understand her new place in the world. It is also the first, it definitely felt a little bit like a first book in a series to me, but I only kind of realized that once I was at the end, because you know, by the end of the book, when things kind of get all revealed, you realize like, oh, we were just getting set up for a huge amount of story. This is like just the beginning, and I'm really excited to continue reading the series. I would say if you're looking for a story that has a very similar vibe to Howl's Moving Castle. Vibe-wise, perfect suggestion. Go read that book, right? But yeah, the language that was used was really sophisticated and really beautiful. It's a very visual experience to read. Obviously, now that I have rambled for like ages about it, I liked it. I recommend it. That is A Winter's Promise. And then the last book that I read was Six Scorched Roses by Carissa Broadbent. I enjoyed this too. I liked almost every single book that I read this month. But I've been saving this book because I enjoyed Serpent in the Wings of Night a lot. I love her first original series, which I cannot remember the name of here probably. This is kind of a shorter one as well. It's like a novella. We are following Lilith. She has a disease which she knows is one day going to take her life. But at the same time, her sister is extremely sick. Lilith is about 30 and she's also a scientist. She is constantly trying to find a cure, not for herself, but for her sister, because there's a bunch of people who are dying of a plague or something like that. But in a house not that far away is Lord Vale. He is a vampire, and she has sort of a hypothesis that she can use his blood to create a cure. Through these exchanges, they develop a very lovely relationship. I think that I didn't start to love it until I was like 75% of the way through, but then I started to really love it. So I think you do have to give it a little bit of a chance if you aren't feeling it super in the beginning, but I just thought that this was very beautiful and very interesting. Like, there is the kind of twist and reveal at the end really got me. Really worked well for me. So that is what I had to talk about. The book I'm currently reading is The Last Heir to the Blackwood Library. This was suggested to me by the Eerie Fairy. I'll also link her channel below. I'm really enjoying it so far. It is a gothic, spooky house book right after World War I. And I will let you know how I feel about that in my next wrap-up video in November. 1 month away from the end of the year. Oh my god. But yeah, those were the books that I read in October. So if you made it to this point in the video, thank you for watching. I would love to hear from you. Leave me a comment about the books that you've been reading. If you think I should finish the Ember and the Ashes series or not. If you have any book recommendations for me, let me know. But yeah, I will see you again very soon in another video. Bye.